There is nothing more painful for a mother than seeing the light in her child's eyes begin to fade. Claire knew something was wrong with Sophie. The small signs were there, silent but impossible to ignore. The cold New York morning felt grayer in that kitchen. The smell of warm pancakes filled the air, but the little girl sitting at the table barely looked at her plate. "Aren't you going to eat? These are your favorites." Sophie lifted her eyes for just a moment, her voice low and distant. "I'm not hungry, Mommy." Claire knelt down beside her, searching for any sign. "Are you sure everything's okay? You seem sad today." A weak smile appeared, but it wasn't convincing. "I'm fine. I'm just tired." Claire nodded slowly, trying not to press, but the weight of that answer lingered in the air. Hours later, Claire waited for Sophie outside the school. The bell rang, and children rushed out, laughing and shouting. Sophie, however, appeared slowly, her backpack dragging along the ground. "How was your day?" It was normal. She didn't even look her mother in the eye. Claire took her hand, feeling the distance between them like an invisible abyss. "How about some hot chocolate when we get home? And that movie you love?" "Okay." The forced smile didn't fool her. In the car, the silence returned. Claire tried to start a conversation. "Did you play with your friends today?" "I didn't feel like playing." The tightness in Claire's chest grew. Sophie, the curious, lively little girl, seemed dimmed. "Something's happening, and I need to understand what it is." That night, after putting Sophie to bed, Claire poured tea for Ethan in the living room. He noticed the distant look on her face, her clear worry. "You look worried. Did something happen?" "It's Sophie. She's different. Quiet, distant. Today she barely touched her breakfast, and at school, she didn't want to play with anyone. That's not like her." "Did you try talking to her?" "I did, but she just says she's tired or that everything's fine. But it's not. It's like she's holding something inside and doesn't know how to tell me." Ethan leaned forward, listening to her carefully. "Sometimes kids don't know how to express what they're feeling. But you know your daughter. She knows she can trust you." Claire sighed, frustrated. "I just don't want her carrying a burden alone. I know what it feels like to carry that weight. I went through it as a child, and I don't want her to go through the same." Ethan touched her hand gently. "You're an incredible mother. The fact that you're paying attention already shows how much you care. Keep being her safe harbor. She'll open up." His calm, steady words brought her a momentary sense of relief. "Thank you. I needed to hear that. I'll always be here. For you and for whatever you need." After Ethan left, Claire entered Sophie's room. The soft light of the bedside lamp illuminated the girl's peaceful face as she slept, hugging her stuffed bear. Claire sat beside her, gently running her fingers through Sophie's hair. "Mommy's here, my love." "Always." Sophie stirred slightly, as if those words reached her even in her dreams. Claire smiled, but as she stood up, the weight of her worries returned. In the silent living room, she sat at the table with her journal open, the pen hesitant between her fingers. She took a deep breath and began to write. "Today, I noticed something that unsettles me. Sophie is different. She's distant, as though carrying a weight she can't share. I don't know what's happening, but I will find out. Adam has used words to divide us before. Is he doing it again? My daughter is my light, and I promised myself I would never let Sophie feel alone or unprotected. I know I need to act with patience and love. I'm her mother, and I will protect her, no matter what it takes. She closed the journal and looked out the window. The city sparkled under the dark sky, but a new determination was growing within her. No ghost from the past will extinguish Sophie's light. The morning was cold and overcast, a light rain tapping against the kitchen window. Claire was finishing up Sophie's lunchbox while her daughter, still in her room, was taking longer than usual. Sophie, sweetheart, are you ready? We have to go. The little girl appeared at the doorway, her backpack in hand, but her dull expression made Claire stop. Sophie had always been such a lively child, and now she seemed like someone else entirely. Come on, my little artist. Today you have science class, remember? You love that. A barely perceptible nod was her only response. Without enthusiasm, Sophie silently followed Claire to the door. On the way to school, silence weighed heavily between them. When Claire parked, she leaned toward Sophie, trying to sound cheerful. Have fun today, sweetheart. You can tell me all about it later, okay? Bye, Mommy. Her voice came out low, almost a whisper. Claire watched her walk through the school gate slowly, the growing unease pressing in her chest. Just as she was about to drive off, Claire noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was Mrs. Mitchell, Sophie's teacher, holding a folded note. Claire quickly got out of the car. Good morning, Claire. I'm sorry to bother you like this, but I'd like you to come to the school tomorrow. We need to talk about Sophie. Something has been worrying me. The words hit Claire like a punch to the stomach. She forced a smile and took the note. Of course. I'll be here early tomorrow. Thank you for letting me know. As the teacher walked away, Claire stood frozen, the paper cold between her fingers, a single question pounding in her mind. What's happening to my daughter? Back at the apartment, Claire tried to distract herself with work, but focus simply wouldn't come. The note sat there on the table, a constant reminder. Every glance at the clock seemed to stretch the hours longer. That afternoon, when Claire picked Sophie up, the girl got into the car without a word, dropping her backpack beside her. How was school today, sweetheart? Normal. Her voice was flat, almost lifeless. What do you say we stop at the park before heading home? I don't want to, Mommy. I just want to go home. Claire nodded, respecting her request. But the silence during the drive only deepened her worry. Through the rearview mirror, she watched Sophie, her head down, lost somewhere far away. At home, Sophie went straight to her room. Claire stayed in the living room, battling the urge to force a conversation. She had to find the right way to approach her. Later, Claire found Sophie sitting on the living room carpet, drawing with her colored pencils scattered around her. She sat beside her, picking up a piece of paper. Can I draw with you? Sophie shrugged without saying a word. Claire began drawing a house with trees while watching her daughter sketch a small figure sitting alone under a dark sky. Is that you, sweetheart? Sophie nodded, without looking at her. Why is the sky so dark? Is something making you sad? For a moment, the little girl hesitated. Finally, she put the pencil down and looked at Claire. It's nothing, Mommy. I just wanted to draw it like this. Claire's heart tightened. She forced a smile, keeping her voice soft. That's okay, my love. Your drawing is beautiful. But if you ever want to talk, you know you can tell me anything, right? A small nod was her only response before Sophie returned to her silence, scribbling again. Claire stayed there beside her, feeling like there was an invisible wall between them. Why does she seem so alone? That night, sitting on her bed, Claire called Ethan. His voice brought her a momentary sense of relief. Sophie's teacher wants to talk to me tomorrow. She said she's worried about her behavior. And today she drew something that broke my heart. Ethan, always calm and caring, responded gently. Claire, you're doing the best you can. Sophie is going through something, but she knows she can trust you. Tomorrow, you'll learn more, and together you'll work through this. What if it's something serious? What if I don't know how to help? You'll know. The love you have for her will guide you. Trust yourself. Claire closed her eyes, feeling the tears well up. Thank you for always being here for me. Always. I'm here for both of you. After hanging up, Claire walked to Sophie's room. Her daughter was sleeping deeply, holding her stuffed bear close. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Claire brushed a strand of hair from Sophie's face. Mommy will figure out what's hurting you, my love. And I'll help you. She left the room quietly and sat alone in the living room, staring at the darkened city through the window. Tomorrow I'll know more. And whatever it is, I'll fight for you, Sophie. Always. The day dawned cloudy, with a thin mist covering the streets of New York. Claire drove silently towards Sophie's school. Her heart beat harder with every passing mile, while the sound of traffic felt distant, muffled by the weight of her worries. In the passenger seat, Claire held a cup of still warm coffee, though she had barely touched it. Her thoughts spun in circles. What if it's something serious? What if Sophie is suffering, and I didn't notice in time? Parking the car in front of the school, Claire sat for a moment, breathing deeply and looking into the rearview mirror. You can do this, Claire. Be strong for her, she murmured to herself. With firm steps, she entered through the school's main doors and walked down the quiet hallway to the teacher's lounge, where Mrs. Mitchell, Sophie's teacher, was already waiting for her. Mrs. Mitchell's office was cozy, with walls filled with colorful drawings made by the students and a bookshelf packed with children's books. Claire sat in a chair across from the teacher's desk, trying to contain her anxiety. Mrs. Mitchell offered a kind smile. Thank you for coming, Claire. I know it must be hard to take time out of your day. Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Sophie is my priority. What's going on? Did she do something wrong? The teacher shook her head calmly. No, it's not that. Sophie is a lovely, polite, and intelligent girl. But in the last few weeks, I've noticed some changes in her behavior. Claire leaned forward slightly, her chest tightening. What kind of changes? Mrs. Mitchell pulled a folder from her desk and took out a few sheets of paper, activities Sophie had completed. She handed the pages to Claire, who began looking through them carefully. The drawings were dark, filled with small, somber figures. A child sitting alone, a heavy sky, and even a house with closed doors. Sophie has always been very creative, loved interacting with her classmates, and was very engaged in activities. But lately, she's been isolating herself. She doesn't play during recess, avoids group projects, and seems very distracted during class. Claire felt a knot in her throat as she looked at the drawings, especially the most recent one, a girl sitting on the ground with a dark cloud over her. "My God," she murmured softly. The teacher continued, her tone careful. "In addition, I've noticed Sophie looks visibly tense on the days she mentions her father. She never says much, but it seems like something is deeply troubling her." Adam's name echoed in Claire's mind like distant thunder. She knew he still had visitation rights with Sophie, and now the pieces were starting to fall into place. "Do you think she might be being pressured in some way?" The teacher nodded gently. "I can't say for certain, Claire. But as her teacher, I believe something is weighing on her shoulders. Perhaps talking with a child therapist or someone she trusts could help Sophie open up." Claire nodded, holding back the tears threatening to fall. The thought of her daughter suffering in silence tore her apart. "I'll do whatever it takes. Thank you for telling me all this, Mrs. Mitchell. Sophie is very lucky to have you. I'm sure that, with your love and support, she'll overcome whatever she's going through." Claire gave her a faint smile, expressing her gratitude with a look before standing and leaving the room. Back in the car, Claire closed the door and sat still, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The pressure of tears became too much, and they fell silently. "How didn't I see this before? My little girl, what is he saying to you?" she whispered, as if her words could ease the pain. After a few minutes, Claire wiped her face with her coat sleeve and picked up her phone. With trembling hands, she called Ethan, who answered almost immediately. "Claire? Is everything okay?" "No, it's not, Ethan. I just spoke with Sophie's teacher. She said Sophie is isolating herself, that she seems scared on the days she sees Adam." On the other end of the line, Ethan was silent for a moment before his voice came through, firm and reassuring. "Claire, this isn't your fault. You're doing your best. But you need to find out what's happening during those visits with Adam. I know. I can't let him hurt her, even if it's emotionally. I have to protect Sophie. And you will. She has you, Claire. You're stronger than you think. Don't forget that." Claire took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. "Thank you, Ethan. I just want her to be happy. And she will be. Because you're by her side." That night, after putting Sophie to bed, Claire sat beside her daughter's bed. The soft glow of the bedside lamp lit the girl's peaceful face. Claire took Sophie's small hand and whispered, "Mommy's here, my light. I promise I'll protect you, no matter what happens." Claire kissed Sophie's forehead and quietly left the room. In the living room, she sat on the couch with her phone in her hands, staring at her contact list. Without hesitating, she opened the conversation with Anna, her therapist, and wrote a short but meaningful message. "I need your help. Sophie is going through something, and I need to understand how to help her." Claire placed the phone on the couch and looked out the window. The city glittered under the dark sky, but within her, a flame of determination burned brighter than ever. "This time, no one will hurt my daughter," she murmured softly. The city lights continued to shine indifferently as Claire sat there, firm, ready to face whatever it took. The cold in New York felt sharper that afternoon, but Claire barely noticed the cutting wind as she walked through the streets toward Anna's office. Her mind was spinning endlessly, burdened with the maternal worries that had been weighing on her for days. The warm, welcoming atmosphere of the office embraced her almost physically. The subtle aroma of chamomile tea mingled with the serenity of neutral walls and soft armchairs. Anna smiled as she entered, her gaze as comforting as ever. "It's always good to see you, Claire. Come in, make yourself comfortable." Claire took off her coat, sat on the sofa, and, for a moment, just took a deep breath. The words seemed tangled in her throat, but finally, she let them out. "It's Sophie, Anna. Something's happening to her, and I don't know how to help. She's been isolating herself, growing distant. Her teacher said she seems tense, especially on the days she sees Adam." Anna leaned forward slightly, her voice firm yet gentle. "When did you start noticing these changes?" "A few weeks ago. She lost her appetite, stopped playing with friends. Even her drawings, they're dark, sad. Always small, lonely figures under heavy clouds. Her teacher said she seems different when her father is mentioned." The therapist nodded slowly, her gaze filled with understanding. "And how do you feel hearing this?" Claire closed her eyes, letting out a shaky sigh before she could control it. "Anger. Anger because Adam can still get to us, even after everything. I thought separating from him would protect Sophie. But now he's using my daughter to hurt me." Anna observed her for a moment before softly asking, "And little Claire? What does she feel?" The question caught Claire off guard. She looked away, searching for words. "Fear. I grew up unprotected. My mother controlled everything, and my father was a ghost in our house. I promised my daughter would never feel that, never carry the burden I carried. But here we are." Anna nodded, her tone both compassionate and firm. "Children perceive much more than we realize. They sense patterns, silences, and the burdens we try to hide. Perhaps Sophie is absorbing the conflict between you and Adam. She might be carrying something that isn't hers to bear." A single tear rolled down Claire's face. She wiped it quickly, her voice low. "What do I do? How do I help my daughter let go of this?" Anna smiled gently. "Let's explore this together. We can do a family constellation. By mapping out the relationships, we'll uncover what's hidden and what's weighing on Sophie. Perhaps she's carrying something that needs to be released." Claire took a deep breath, nodding. Anna's words brought a glimmer of hope. "I want to do this. I want to understand what's happening to her and help her. And you've already started, Claire. The simple act of seeking help shows how much you love her and are willing to protect her." Back at the apartment, Claire was preparing dinner while watching Sophie from the kitchen counter. The little girl giggled softly at something on TV, and for a moment, Claire's chest tightened. Sophie was so small, so full of life, and Claire knew she would do anything to protect her. Sitting beside her on the sofa, Claire handed her a plate and smiled. "Your favorite pasta. I hope it's good." Sophie smiled, a light but genuine smile. "Thank you, Mommy." Claire watched her eat silently. Every gesture, every expression, every detail seemed to scream a truth that Sophie didn't yet know how to say. Then, Claire decided to open a small door. "You know, today I spoke with a friend who helps people understand how they feel. Sometimes, we carry a lot of things inside and don't even realize it," she said, touching her heart. "Talking helps make it feel lighter." Sophie paused for a moment, her fork hovering. She looked at her mother with curiosity. "Why did you need to talk to her?" Claire chose her words carefully, her voice calm and steady. Because sometimes, even adults feel sad or worried, and we also need help understanding how we feel. Did you know you can do that too? Talk, share. That way, the sadness doesn't feel so heavy. Sophie seemed to think about it, her gaze distant for a moment. Can I tell you, Mommy? The question made Claire's heart both ache and warm at the same time. She held Sophie's small hand, her gaze full of love. Always, my love. Whenever you want. Sophie nodded, returning to her plate, but Claire knew this was a first step. And sometimes, one small step was all they needed. Later that night, after Sophie fell asleep, Claire sat at the edge of her bed, watching her daughter's serene face. She ran her fingers through Sophie's hair, whispering softly, "Mommy's here. And I will protect you from everything, my love." In the living room, under the soft glow of the lamp, Claire opened her journal and began to write. Today, I realized Sophie is carrying a burden that isn't hers. Anna said children feel our struggles, even if they can't explain it. It breaks my heart, but it also brings clarity. Now is the time to act. I'm no longer the woman Adam manipulated. I'm Sophie's mother. Strong enough to break this cycle and give her the lightness she deserves. Closing the journal, Claire looked out the window. The lights of New York still glittered, but the sky seemed a little less dark. A new determination pulsed inside her. She whispered to herself, like a promise, "We will break free. And I will bring your light back, Sophie." It ends here. The city slept outside, but inside Claire, something had awakened. The day dawned under a cloudy sky, as if the weather mirrored the weight of the moment. Claire held Sophie's small hand firmly as they walked down the hallway of the building in silence. Every step felt longer than the last. "We're going to see Anna today, my love," she explained gently. "Do you remember her? That friend of Mommy's who helps people feel better." Sophie looked up, curious, though the nervousness in her eyes was evident. "The lady with the red hair?" Claire smiled, giving her hand a soft squeeze. "That's right. Today, she's going to help us understand some things that make us sad. But don't worry. I'll be with you the whole time." The little girl nodded quietly, gripping her mother's fingers a little tighter. Claire took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell. The door opened softly, and Anna appeared with her familiar, welcoming smile. "Hi, Claire." "Hi, Sophie. Welcome." The therapist knelt to Sophie's height, her voice even softer. "You can call me Anna if you'd like. Here, you can feel completely comfortable. We have cozy pillows, and even some toys nearby. Do you like to play?" Sophie offered a shy smile and nodded. Claire let out a quiet sigh of relief, seeing her daughter accept Anna's presence with some ease. "Shall we get started?" Anna suggested, turning to Claire with a kind but steady gaze. The room was spacious and quiet, lit only by the soft glow of a lamp. In the center, a table held small wooden figurines, simple dolls that seemed to await an important role in this session. "Sophie, sometimes the things we feel in here," Anna explained, touching her heart, "come from places we don't even realize. Today, we're going to try to understand what's making you sad. We'll use these little figurines to play and look at everything carefully. Does that sound good?" Sophie's eyes shone with curiosity as she gently touched one of the figures. Claire sat beside her, keeping her breath steady so as not to reveal her own anxiety. Let's start with you, Claire, Anna continued, addressing the mother. I want you to choose the figurines to represent yourself, Sophie, and her father. With trembling hands, Claire selected the figures and placed them in the center of the table. Sophie was positioned a little away from Adam, while Claire's figure stood beside her daughter, like an anchor. Now just observe what you feel as you look at this. Claire stared at the arrangement. A wave of emotions swelled in her chest, tears rising before she could stop them. I see distance, she whispered. It's like Sophie is trapped by an invisible weight. And Adam, he's still there, trying to pull her away from me. Anna watched calmly, as if connecting invisible threads in that dynamic. And you, Sophie? How do you feel looking at these figurines? The little girl was silent for a moment, her expression far too serious for her age. She pointed her finger toward Adam's figure. He's too big. He stays close to me. Then I can't see Mommy. Claire swallowed hard, her heart pounding. Anna leaned in slightly. You can move this figurine, Sophie. Place it wherever you think it should go. Sophie picked up Adam's figure carefully and moved it further back on the table. This is better, she murmured. Now I can see Mommy. A silent tear slid down Claire's face, and she felt something inside her begin to release. Anna smiled gently and encouraged her. Claire, now it's time to say something important to Sophie. Tell her that she's just a child, that she doesn't need to carry this weight. That you're here to take care of everything. Claire held her daughter's small hands, looking directly into her eyes, and spoke with a trembling but loving voice. You're just a child, my love. You don't need to carry any of this. Mommy's here. Mommy will take care of everything. For a moment, Sophie stood still. Then, with a quiet sob, she threw herself into Claire's arms, crying softly. I felt scared, Mommy. I didn't know how to tell you. Claire wrapped her arms tightly around her daughter, feeling her own tears flow freely. She kissed the top of Sophie's head, whispering, It's okay now. Mommy's here. And everything's going to be all right. Anna watched silently, respecting that moment of healing between mother and daughter. There was no rush, only the space needed for unspoken truths to find their place. When they left the office, the cold air outside felt lighter, less oppressive. Sophie walked beside her mother, holding her hand, her face calm in a way Claire hadn't seen for a long time. Anna is nice, Mommy, Sophie said, looking up with a small but genuine smile. I feel better now. Claire smiled, squeezing her little hand more tightly. I'm so glad, my love. This is just the beginning. We're going to be okay, together. Sophie nodded, and the two of them looked up at the sky, where the sun was starting to break through the gray clouds. Claire took a deep breath, feeling a wave of hope fill her chest. The past was still there, but for the first time, it seemed smaller. Sophie had taken a step out of the shadow surrounding her. And Claire knew she wasn't alone anymore. Nothing will stop us, she murmured quietly, as if making a promise. And with firm steps, they walked toward the future that was finally beginning to take shape. The morning started differently in Claire's small apartment. Sunlight streamed softly through the window, filling the living room with warmth. Sophie was sitting on the floor, focused on her drawing, her brow furrowed in concentration, while Claire watched her from the sofa, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. What are you drawing today, my love? She asked gently, her gaze resting on her daughter. Sophie looked up, a light smile brightening her face. For the first time in weeks, it was a genuine smile, free of the weight Claire had been noticing recently. "It's us, Mommy," she replied excitedly, holding out the drawing. "Look!" Claire got up and knelt beside her, studying the paper. On it, two figures walked hand in hand beneath a blue sky speckled with stars. The scene warmed her heart. "It's beautiful, Sophie. You've always been an incredible artist." The little girl's eyes sparkled with pride, and she smiled. "I love you so much, my princess," Claire murmured, gently running her hand through Sophie's hair. "I love you too, Mommy." For a moment, Claire felt the air grow lighter. The session with Anna had been a first step, and now she knew she had to protect that light she saw shining again in Sophie's eyes. Later, sitting at the dining table, Claire stared at the open laptop. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting for her words. She knew she had to act, that she could no longer remain silent in the face of Adam's behavior. Taking a deep breath, she began typing a direct email, each word loaded with firmness. "Adam, the time you spend with Sophie needs to be a safe and positive experience for her. If you continue making comments that leave her insecure or affect our relationship, I will be forced to take legal action. Sophie deserves a light and happy childhood. I will no longer use silence as my response. I'm taking care of this. Claire." She reread the email, feeling the weight of each phrase. Then, with a final breath, she clicked send. A small step, but a significant one. For the first time, Claire was telling Adam, with absolute clarity, that he no longer had control. No more fear. No more silence, she murmured, as if making a vow. Later in the afternoon, while Claire prepared dinner, her phone buzzed on the counter. She reached for it, hesitating before looking. The screen displayed a new message from Adam. "You don't get to tell me how to act with my daughter. This little show of yours will end. If you try to push me away, you'll regret it." Claire's stomach churned, but something inside her had shifted. The old fear that used to consume her had given way to a calm, controlled anger. She was no longer the woman Adam could intimidate. With steady fingers, she typed her response. "Sophie is my priority. If you don't know how to treat her with respect, someone needs to teach you. This ends here." She set the phone aside, feeling her heart beat harder. Adam would react, but this time, she was ready. He's going to realize that the woman he used to intimidate doesn't exist anymore. That night, Claire tucked Sophie into bed and adjusted the blankets around her. Sophie reached for her hand, her voice soft. "Mommy, today was a happy day." Claire sat beside her, smiling. "It's so good to hear that, my love. We deserve days like this, don't we?" Sophie nodded, but a shadow crossed her face, leaving her thoughtful. "Daddy said that you're a bad person. But I don't think so. He's wrong, isn't he?" Claire's heart ached, but she remained calm, running her fingers through Sophie's hair. "What Daddy says isn't true, sweetheart. Sometimes people say things they shouldn't because they're sad or angry. But what matters is that you know Mommy loves you very much. I'll always be here to take care of you." Sophie smiled, slowly closing her eyes. "I know, Mommy. Good night." "Good night, my light." Claire kissed her daughter's forehead and left the room quietly. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she closed the door. Adam's words still lingered, but the promise that Sophie would grow up knowing the truth soothed her heart. The truth will prevail. Sophie will know she is loved and protected. Later, sitting on the balcony with a warm cup of tea in her hands, Claire looked out at the lights of New York, feeling the cold wind brush against her face. For the first time in a long time, she felt strong. A message from Ethan popped up on her phone. "How are you? I've been thinking about you both all day." Claire smiled, replying simply, "Stronger. We're moving forward. And this is just the beginning." She set the phone down and lifted her gaze to the star-filled sky. A deep sigh escaped her lips, as if releasing the last remnants of fear. The past won't define us anymore. The future is ours. And it starts now. The apartment was quiet that Saturday afternoon. The sweet scent of vanilla and butter filled the kitchen as Claire stirred the batter of a recipe Sophie adored. In the living room, the little girl sat on the carpet, colored pencils scattered around her, her face lit up with concentration. Soft music played in the background, and Claire felt, for the first time in a long while, that peace was truly there. The sound of her phone vibrating on the counter broke the moment. Claire dried her hands on her apron before checking the screen. Adam's name flashed on the display, and a cold sensation coursed through her spine. Taking a deep breath, she answered, keeping her tone controlled. "Hi, Adam. What is it?" His voice came through calm, far too calculated, as always. "I wanted to invite you and Sophie to lunch tomorrow. I thought it would be good for her to see that we're okay." Claire frowned, sensing a flicker of suspicion. It wasn't like Adam to suggest something like this. Why now? You never wanted family lunches before. That's exactly why, he insisted, with that false calm. "I think it's time Sophie sees that we can get along without fighting. For her sake." His words sounded right, but something didn't add up. Even so, the idea of creating a peaceful environment for their daughter made Claire hesitate. "All right. But if you try anything..." "Relax, Claire," he cut her off. "I just want what's best for my daughter. See you tomorrow." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Claire placed the phone back on the counter and stood there, absorbing what had just happened. "I need to be ready," she murmured to herself. The next morning, the tension was palpable, despite Claire's efforts to maintain a smile. Sophie sat on the bed while her mother tied her small shoes. "If you don't feel okay, if Daddy says something that makes you sad, you can tell me, okay?" Claire looked into her daughter's eyes, with firmness and love. "Mommy is here for you." Sophie nodded slowly, her childish smile returning. "Okay, Mommy." The restaurant was large and noisy, full of families enjoying their Sunday lunches. Adam was already seated when they arrived, dressed impeccably, with a smile Claire knew all too well, polished, but empty. He stood as they approached. "Hi, Sophie." "Hi, Claire. Please, sit." Claire kept her posture firm, always alert, as Sophie eagerly settled into her chair. The first few minutes passed with superficial small talk. Adam asked about school, and Sophie responded excitedly, sharing details about an art project. Claire watched closely, waiting for the moment when his mask would slip. And then it happened. While Sophie folded a napkin, distracted, Adam leaned slightly toward Claire, his voice low and laced with intention. "Do you really think you can replace me in our daughter's life? That your little boyfriend is a better father than me?" Claire froze for a second but didn't allow him to see any weakness. Her gaze remained steady, her voice controlled. "Adam, this lunch is for Sophie. I won't let you turn it into a fight." His smile twisted into something sarcastic. "You've always been like this. Pretending to be strong, but deep down, you're fragile. It's pointless, Claire. You won't win." The sound of Sophie's fork clattering on her plate drew Claire's attention. The little girl looked up at them, sensing something was wrong. "Mommy? Daddy? What's happening?" Claire took a deep breath and leaned toward her daughter with a soft smile, shifting the tone. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. How about we pick out a dessert?" Sophie turned her focus back to the menu, unaware of the silent tension hanging in the air. Claire looked back at Adam, her voice low but filled with resolve. "Listen to me carefully. I'm not the woman you once knew. You can try to manipulate me, but it won't work anymore. Sophie deserves a father who respects her. If you truly care about her, stop using her as a weapon. Because if you don't, I'll take the necessary steps. And you know I can." Adam opened his mouth to respond, but Claire didn't give him the chance. Her voice cut through the air. "This ends here." For a moment, Adam was silent. His expression hardened, but Claire saw something new in his eyes, the realization that he had lost control. On the way home, the car was filled with silence. Sophie stared out the window, her thoughts elsewhere. She was the one to break the quiet. "Mommy, why did Daddy say those things?" Claire glanced at her through the rearview mirror, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes people say things because they're sad or angry, sweetheart. But it's not your fault." The little girl seemed thoughtful, then murmured, "I just want you two to be happy." Claire's heart ached, but she kept her voice steady. "I know, my love. And I promise I'm doing everything I can so you can have a happy, light life. You're the most important thing to me." Sophie smiled softly, and for the first time in a long while, Claire saw her shoulders relax. "I like it when it's just us, Mommy. And Ethan is nice, too." Claire smiled, feeling tears of relief well up. "I like our life like this too, my princess." As she drove, Claire looked up at the cloudy sky, where the sun had started to break through. For the first time, she felt she had faced Adam without fear, that she was finally breaking the cycle that had held her captive. "Nothing will stop us now. The light I'm rebuilding for myself and Sophie will shine brighter than ever." The sky was beginning to take on soft shades of pink and gold as the sun rose over New York City. The cold wind blew across the balcony, but Claire felt only serenity. Holding a cup of warm tea in her hands, she watched the city wake up, the timid movement below, and the comforting silence of the early morning. "We've made it this far," she murmured to herself, a faint smile on her lips. Inside the apartment, Sophie still slept deeply on the sofa, hugging her favorite teddy bear. Her peaceful face seemed lighter, as if the weight of dark days had finally lifted. Claire approached quietly, observing her for a moment, feeling a wave of love and gratitude. In the kitchen, the sound of footsteps made Claire turn around. Ethan appeared, already dressed, with that calm smile she had come to know so well. "Awake early?" he asked, pouring himself some coffee. Claire smiled softly, her gaze brightened by the sunlight beginning to stream through the window. Sometimes it's nice to hear the world wake up. She paused for a moment. Today is a special day. Ethan watched her for a moment before gently touching her hand. Let's celebrate the future. Later, the apartment came alive with the sound of laughter and the aroma of the special lunch Claire and Ethan were preparing. Sophie, excited, carefully set the table with colorful napkins. Uncle Ethan brought a cake. Can I put candles on it, Mommy? Even if it's not a birthday? Of course you can, my love, Claire laughed, exchanging a look with Ethan. Today deserves to be celebrated. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. Anna entered with a bouquet of fresh flowers in her arms, wearing her usual welcoming smile. I hope you won't throw me out for showing up without an official invitation. You're always welcome here, Claire replied, embracing her warmly. As everyone gathered in the living room, the atmosphere felt lighter than ever. Sophie ran around the table, laughing, with the cake decorated and filled with makeshift candles. Anna observed the scene and then looked at Claire, her eyes shining with pride. Look at your daughter, she said softly. She's happy, free. And you're stronger than I've ever seen you. Claire took a deep breath, Anna's words striking a chord deep in her heart. I couldn't have done it without your help. Thank you for helping me see. Anna placed a firm, caring hand on her shoulder. The courage was yours, Claire. The strength was in you all along. With the table ready, Claire raised her glass of juice, her heart overflowing as she looked around. Sophie, sitting next to Ethan, held her own glass carefully, her eyes shining with joy. I want to say a few words, Claire began, her voice soft but steady. There was a time when I couldn't imagine being here today, surrounded by love, peace, and hope. There were difficult days, but it was all worth it. She turned her gaze to Sophie, who smiled and held her hand. Sophie, you are my light. I promised we would be okay, and today, I know we're on the right path. The little girl nodded happily, squeezing her mother's hand. Claire then looked at Ethan, whose eyes reflected the same affection that had always comforted her. Ethan, thank you for showing me that love can be gentle and light. For standing by my side when I needed it most. He smiled, a silent gesture that spoke louder than words. Claire raised her glass higher. To the past, which taught us. To the present, which we are building. And to the future, which is full of possibilities. To the future, they all repeated, as Sophie giggled softly, enchanted by the moment. At the end of the day, with the house quiet once more and Sophie already asleep, Claire and Ethan stood on the balcony. The city shone before them, its light spreading like stars on the horizon. Ethan looked at Claire, who seemed more at peace than ever. You look peaceful. She smiled softly, gazing at the dark sky tinged with the first rosy hues of the new dawn. For the first time, I am. For so long, I thought pain was all I would ever know, that the past would define me. But I was wrong. She took a deep breath. There's always a chance to start over. To choose love, peace, and happiness. Ethan intertwined his fingers with hers. And what do you choose now? Claire looked at him for a moment, her heart full of hope. I choose the future. A future full of love, light, and freedom. For me, for Sophie, and for us. They stood there, side by side, watching the sun rise on the horizon. The imaginary camera pulls away slowly, revealing the couple on the balcony as the world awakens around them. Sometimes life challenges us, but we can always start over. Because, in the end, the love and strength we carry within us are greater than any pain.